Well, thanks again for all of our guests, and hopefully everybody has a little bit more insight into what's going on in the special needs community of Austin and Central Texas. So I mentioned earlier I was going to share 5 surprises, and I'll be quick because many of them we've already talked about, but I just wanted to share them because I love learning as part of the writing process. And so what I envisioned and what Gwendolyn and I envisioned when we first started working on the project, it really changed almost 180 degrees. So many times we heard of this cliff, and we experienced it as well. When Gwendolyn reached the end of her high school career, we felt like we were falling off this cliff. And I can't tell you how many other families use the same term without any prompting. They said, yeah, I'm falling off a cliff. And it is that because we're used to our child or our young adult spending most of their waking hours in a school where they're taken care of. They learn, they develop social skills and friends. Some are more challenging than others, but regardless of that, at the age of somewhere between 18 and 22, they oftentimes go home. And sometimes they stop learning and they stop engaging with others. And so it really is, and nobody gives you this manual that says, well, here's what you need to think about in order to keep that momentum going. And that's really what drove us to do this. But as part of this, so our first learning was we realized that everybody's experience is different. So we've talked about that before, but we were all up into what was Gwendolyn going through and the opportunities we wanted to create for her. But what works for her is different for every other family, and I think everybody's kind of echoed that tonight. And so we strived in the book to, instead of saying, well, this is what we did, so this is what you need to do, that we wanted to really say, here are options, here are things you should think about. Think about housing, think about health and work and continuing education. Here's some different options, and so you can choose what's right for your family. And it really changed the dynamics of the book, I think. Second one was that many people, probably including ourselves, thought that independence or the discussion around independence really starts when they're about 18 to 22. And so then they're on their own, they're falling off this cliff, so we got to figure something out. But what we've realized is independence starts really early. And it's not just for the individual or the self-advocate with Down syndrome or other IDD. It really probably, just as importantly, starts for the family themselves and the parents. It's that mindset of thinking, and we're all overwhelmed at day one, but to really think about, instead of the limitations and the protection of our vulnerable kids, to think about the opportunities, and there are so many opportunities out there in the world today. And to think about that early and create that mindset in the whole family and create opportunities for them to learn and make choices and make problem solving skills. Because if we just try and flip that switch at 18 or 38 or 58, it's really hard to do. And so I found that the audience that I anticipated of being parents of 20-somethings is only part of the audience that really needs to be thinking about independence. The third thing, so you've heard from Barbara and TJ about benefits and SSI and all these challenging things, and what I realized through this process is it's really hard to know all the benefits that are out there. It's really easy to lose the benefits once you get them, because there are all sorts of rules that you have to follow in order to preserve her eligibility for certain things. And so the system doesn't help us out, but if we don't really think about it and study and find great resources like TJ and Barbara, then we're left to our own devices, and it's really complicated. I mean, these guys have made a living off of trying to help other families because it's hard, if not impossible, to do it ourselves. And so we tried to put a lot of that in the book and more resources so that families could find the resources that they were due. I've said this many times, but independence is really a beautiful thing, and it's really expensive as well. So you should be getting all the resources available to you from the earliest age, and certainly make sure that you hold on to those resources. And so really critical. Earlier on, we talked about lifespan, and I don't know, I mean, we're all into our own lives, so this really surprised me, but back in the 50s, the average lifespan for people with Down syndrome was about 10. 10. In the 80s, the average lifespan for people with Down syndrome was about 25. That's not that long ago. Most of us were around it in the 80s, 25. Now it's 65, thanks to a lot of medical developments, a lot of things that people are doing here in this room to provide a meaningful life and opportunities for people with special needs. And so it's changed a lot. The challenge is that now they're living so much longer. So they have great opportunities that weren't around before, but they also have to think about, how am I going to afford to live twice as long? How am I going to stay busy and keep my mind active? How am I going to deal with health issues that when we were in our 30s were not really an issue, but now are very prevalent in our 50s and 60s? And so those were things that I think many of us don't really think about. I think the industry and the community is really evolving in these areas very quickly, but definitely parents should be aware of these things and make it part of their independence plan. Really, this is the first generation where people with Down syndrome are outliving their caregivers. And so they have to think about, what do I do in the long term? Where am I going to be? Who's going to take care of me? And I will have to say that, I mean, we love all of our kids, but empty nesting is awesome. Don't forego the retirement that you once dreamed of yourself. But it takes a little planning to get there. Yeah. And finally, early on in the project, we did a survey with a couple hundred families with Down syndrome from around the country and even beyond. And we asked them a lot of things about what are they doing and what are their aspirations and their dreams and so forth. But the question that really stood out to me, or the answers that stood out, was to the question of what do you think is holding you back from the dreams and ambitions that you as a family have? And there were many answers that they could select from, including, you know, the capabilities of my individual with Down syndrome, or financial, or other family members, or the community itself, or being rural, or whatever the case may be. The number one by far was the protective parent. And the people that filled out that survey were the protective parent. And so they realized that, and it's hard, right? We're all parents, and so it doesn't take Down syndrome to make us feel queasy about them going off on their own, but they do generally, eventually. And but it's really something that the world has great possibilities. We just need to trust in our self-advocates and our loved ones, and give them every opportunity that's out there, and there are lots of opportunities. And certainly with the people here in this room, I think that the people with special needs and the IDD community in Central Texas is in really good hands. So thank you all for coming.